Well, it's got to be a good day when you get introduced by the queen of holistic medicine, the world premiere in holistic medicine. So things are good, and it's a great way to start. What a great conference. Yeah, it feels great. And many thanks to Dean and to Caroline. I'm inspired, I'm excited, I'm kind of nervous because there's so much to do. I'm excited that there is so much to do. So, my task was to talk to you about PNI, Psychoneuroimmunology. Okay, before I do that, I'd like to thank my sponsors, Nature's Menu. They're a great company. They've been going about 32 years now. They used to be called Anglian Meat Products. They're now called Nature's Menu, and they are feeding the most number of dogs and cats in the country. And I really support them with that. One of the reasons that I really like them is because they are trying to promote research. Okay, they are spending their hard-earned money on research in order to allow us holistic practitioners to go to the veterinary profession to say, this is raw food and this is why it's so amazing. Okay, there isn't that much rock solid evidence out there now. There is a lot of evidence, but there's not the categoric evidence that the vets really like. So I'm going to talk to you about psychoneuroimmunology. That's what my task was to make psychoneuroimmunology sexy. And that's what I'm going to try and do. Actually, I'm not going to talk to you about psychoneuroimmunology. I'm going to talk to you about psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology. Okay? And I'm going to describe it. The psycho, so what's that? That's the mind. That's what makes us sentient beings. Neuro is the nervous system. It's kind of coming down to earth. And the nervous system is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Okay? The endocrine system is the medical way of talking about hormones. Okay? And I thought that was probably what's going to strike a chord with most of the audience. Okay? The pill, hormones, these things are very influential in how we exist, how we function. And then finally we've got immunology, which is about defending yourself, knowing yourself and knowing what is not self, and being able to differentiate between the two and defend yourself. About us and them. And then I thought, my goodness, this is still sounding kind of difficult to understand what PNI actually is. So in bed last night, I was thinking, how can I get these concepts across? And how can I get the enormity of PNI across? And the answer, I thought, right, what are the equivalents? What are the real world equivalents to show you how simple and how enormous these things are? So P, which is psycho, okay? Psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology. P is philosophy. It's big and it's ponderous and it's profound and it drives us, okay? So we're thinking psychology, okay? It's that big. N is more matter of fact. It's more black and white. This is the nervous system. Okay, so I would say it's more similar to physics and maybe information technology. Okay, in the real world. Okay, E, endocrinology. It's about highs. It's about lows. It's about love. It's about depression. It's about the real stuff of life. And so for me, that's like music. It's like opera. It is life. Embodied, okay? That's endocrinology. And I, immunology. What's immunology? It's sport. It's us against them. It's the home team versus the away team.
Okay? And everybody knows that these things are linked. Yeah? Your grandmother would have said to you, be careful what you think, because it can become realized. If you're very stressed, you can become ill. Everybody knows this stuff. Okay? But philosophy can inform information technology, can inform physics. Philosophy can inform music. Yeah, music inspires philosophers. Philosophers inspire musicians. Philosophers can influence sport and the philosophy of sport. And there is a lot of psychology in sport. Okay, so I'm trying to get across that everything is related to everything. Yeah, I think Lauryn Hill it was who said, everything is everything. Okay. So, physics, information technology can inspire the new philosophy. Okay? Information technology, physics. If you think of Stephen Hawking, he's a physicist. He measures things, he works with the real world, even if it is cosmological. But he is a philosopher. Yeah, if you've read any of his books, he's a physicist and he's a philosopher. Information technology and music. Yeah, look at Spotify. Yeah, that's opening up music to people who haven't heard music before all over the world, for example. Information technology and sport, just need to say sky, and there you have it. Okay, these two things are dramatically interlinked. Music inspires philosophy. Of course it does. Music is philosophy. Philosophy is music. There's a big tie-up there. Music and information technology, we've just talked about that. Music and sport, what do before every sporting competition? They play music, because music can empower you. So all these elements within PNEI will inform and change everything else there. And it's really, this is a modern discipline which is realizing that these four things are completely interrelated. Yeah, when I was at college, these things were described as being completely different, but science has realized that these things are completely interrelated. So for me, PNEI is the medicine of the future. I do a lot of homeopathy, and homeopathy, a lot of it starts in the world of psychology and neurology, and then we get this trickle-down effect into the world of the body and the functioning body. So describing PNEI and trying to tell you about it is a bit like trying to describe the internet. Where do you start? Where do you start? It's vast. It's almost unknowable. And the same is true of PNEI. I think that's a great place to start. Okay, sugars. Thank you, Caroline, for ruining this part of my talk with her introduction earlier. Thank you, Rodney, for also ruining the other half of my talk, because he talked about sugars. But repetition is quite a good thing, because this is really, really a very important topic. And I'm going to talk to you about sugars and how they influence the PNEI. Yeah, PNEI is this big machine, and sugars is like throwing a well-aimed spanner into the middle of that physiological machine. And I'd like to talk to you about that. But first of all, I'd just like to have one of these, okay? I'm just going to have a little rant for 5 or 10 minutes about this. Okay? Because this is where we feed sugars to our pets. Now, I'm not saying I do, and I would imagine a large proportion of the audience don't. Those who do feed kibble, then please just lend me your ear for 2 seconds. I'd like to talk to you about kibble, because I think it is a modern phenomenon.
And we need to have a realistic relationship with kibble. My profession thinks it is a great thing, and I disagree with that. Okay, and many holistic practitioners also disagree with that. So, how do you make kibble? How do you make kibble? What's the contents of kibble? And how does kibble and sugars, because, you know, are there any sugars in kibble? There may not be, okay? But kibble contains a lot of starch. It's starch that's been cooked, and your digestive process will break down that starch into sugars. The reason I'm calling them sugars and not just sugar, because when you think of sugar, you'll think of Tate and Lyle. They're like the white crystalline stuff that you put on your Weetabix, okay? It's bigger than that. We've got to think about sugars as such. And did you know that you can't make a kibble without 30 to 50% starch, which you cook, which can then be broken down into sugars? So when we look at the analysis, we look at the carbohydrate. A note for your notebooks is, and it's called NFE, nitrogen-free extract. That means they remove all the protein, they remove all the fat, and what's left is your carbohydrates. Okay? This is grain carbohydrate, and within the kibble, it is used, apart from boosting the energy level within the diet, it is used in order to bind the thing together. Because if you have a kibble without any carbs, you've got a bag of powder, which is pretty difficult to sell to the American housewife. Okay, but if you've got kibble, it's great. It's really easy. You can feed Fido and then go and do something else very easily. Okay, so within this product, we have over 50% cooked, starchy. They call it soluble carbohydrate. These are the sugars, or the multiple sugar molecules that you can ingest, which will have an influence on your insulin, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute or two. So this stuff that we're feeding our dogs is 50% soluble carbohydrate. That's like having spaghetti as 50% of your plate every time you have a meal. Okay? And we all know these days that fats don't make you fat. It's your carbs that make you fat. Okay? I think Dr. Atkin, whose diet I don't agree with, but Dr. Atkin proved that fats don't make you fat. You with me? Okay, so let's just take an example. Yeah, we're all here because we love dogs. So let's take a doggy example. So this beautiful red-headed person, we'll call her Annie. She weighs about 18 kilos. And let's feed her some kibble and just see exactly how much kibble, how much carbohydrate she's eating, and see how that compares with the human model. Okay? So, if Annie's about 18 kilos, we would be feeding her, where are we there? We would be feeding her about 230 to 305 grams of food. If she does agility or flyball or something like this, she's going to be on the top end of there because she's going to be burning a lot of energy. But if we take the dry matter rather than the as fed, that's going to take the grams. So let's just take her consumption of the whole food as being 230 grams a day. Okay? Bear with me. All will be revealed. So how much grain carb, how much cooked porridge, how much cooked spaghetti is she eating on an annual basis? Okay, let's do the math, as my friends in the corner would say. So 30 to 55% of kibble is soluble carbohydrate to bring it all together. Okay, so if she's eating 230 grams a day, okay, half of that is the grain carb. That means that she's eating 115 grams of grain carb every day. So every year she will be eating about 42 grams of cooked spaghetti every year. Okay? If you think about it, 42, sorry? Kilograms. Sorry, thank you, Ben. Kilograms of cooked carbohydrate every year. Okay, can you imagine that? Spaghetti 3 times a day, spaghetti twice a day. There's no wonder that we're having the obesity problem that we are currently experiencing, but more of that later. Okay, let's do a comparison. Let's do a comparison with how this compares with the human model. Okay, so in the USA, where they have a major obesity problem among the humans, the average grain carb intake is about let's try that. Is about 60 kilos. This comes from Dr. Perlmutter, whose book is called Grain Brain. I've got a reference for you later if you're interested in this stuff. And he's saying the nutritionists in the States are horrified that the human beings could be eating as much as 113 pounds of grain every year. 100 years ago, it was a pound or 2 every year. Now, with the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what do we have for breakfast? We have cornflakes, or we have Cocoa Pops, or we have muesli, or we have porridge, okay? So we've got a grain starch. What do we have for lunch? We have sandwiches, grain starch. What do we have for dinner? We have pasta, because it's good for you, because it's low fat. Yeah, really? Okay? And so the Western diet is a high grain diet, and we now choose to feed it to our animals. So if we look at Annie, she's eating about 42 kilos, and this is actually dry weight. If you actually say what it would be as fed, it would probably be 3 times that. But let's just say it's 42 kilos of this spaghetti every year, which would be her body weight doubled 2.5 times. So the human nutritionists, who've got an awful lot more information, and they've got the researchers, they've got an awful lot of more backup. They're saying they're horrified when we humans eat 75% of our body weight in cooked spaghetti, and yet we are feeding completely legitimately 2.5 to 5 times their body weight in carbs. And I have a real problem with that. What does FEDIAF? FEDIAF is the European body of pet food manufacturers, okay? And they lay down the guidelines. And so when we look at the guidelines in Europe, they base all their details on the AAFCO, which is kind of the guiding body for nutrients in the States. Okay, so basically just pinch the data from these, because it's the recognized way of doing things. And when you look at their guidelines, and you can find this online, okay, it's open source, there are 8 mentions of carbohydrate. Okay, on page 23, there are 5 mentions with regard to hypoglycemia, low blood glucose in bitches who are in late pregnancy and whelping. Okay, 5 mentions, page 23. And then on page 57, there are 3 mentions when it just talks about technical aspects of the energy load of food. There are no guidelines for how much or how little carb you put in your diet. Frightening. Anyone know who that is? George Bernard Shaw. And he said very wisely, and I use it in many applications, and when one is doing holistic medicine, one can use this. Karen, you'll love this. This is a great quote. Custom will reconcile people to any atrocity. Okay? It means that if the status quo is that we feed these high levels of carb, then it's okay to continue doing it. Just as if your parents sent children up the chimney, like in the Victorian era, then it's probably okay, and I'll keep doing it. Or we've had slaves in our family for 100 years. Why should we change? Okay? That's what George Bernard Shaw is talking about. If customs, beware, some customs are very toxic. Okay. We can relax now. Okay, so back to the day job, and there's a really great researcher. One thing I've found recently, and this was a tip from a guy called Tim Ferriss. He's a genius. He's an American who has an inquiring mind into nutrition, into productivity, into education, into running businesses very, very efficiently. Okay, and he said a great way to learn stuff is to look on YouTube, because when you're busy, you don't have time to read through books and books and books. So I found Gary Taubes on YouTube and found him very inspiring. And what he has to say about sugar is this. He says that sugar to obesity is what smoking is to lung cancer. Now, this doesn't mean that if you take a spoonful of sugar, you're immediately going to die. Just as if you take one cigarette, you're not going to get lung cancer. And if my children are watching this in 20 years' time, smoking is not big and it's not clever, FIFA and Arto, so please don't do it. So sugar is to obesity what smoking is to lung cancer. Okay, it means that it's got to be repetitive, but we need to, in order to cause the damage, but it is toxic at every stage of the way. Every single cigarette, every single teaspoon of sugar is going to be having a deleterious effect on your body. And you've got to be aware of that, because that's going to be throwing your PNEI out. Okay? You don't believe me, do you? You're thinking, oh, sugar, come on, it's only sugar. It's only sugar. It can't be that bad. Let's just look into that a little bit more carefully. So, take a big deep breath, and this is what sugars do. Sugars are pro-inflammatory. Sugars are pro-adrenaline, which will have kick onto behavior issues. Sugars will therefore, because adrenaline's involved, will have an effect on cortisol, which is immunosuppressive. So that's going to affect you. As Caroline, in her fabulous presentation earlier, said, that glutamate is a stimulatory neurotransmitter, and it is released when the brain feels that there's hypoglycemia. Okay, so glutamate, excitement, aggression, anxiety. Okay, everybody dealing with behavior has to be aware of this stuff. These are the PNEI. These are the drivers behind what's happening. In humans, it's been linked with Alzheimer's. Okay, because of this pro-inflammatory effect. So sugar has been linked with Alzheimer's. And I think that's on everybody's mind in more ways than one. It's been linked with obesity. Sugars, directly and indirectly, will promote obesity. And we're going to talk about that in a second. It's linked directly and indirectly with diabetes. and it's linked directly and indirectly with cancer. If we pick that all apart, this is what it looks like, okay? And what I'd like to do is to, if you want to take a picture of that, I think it's okay. I'm not sure what the management say, but I think it's okay. Let's go through that. I want to pick it into 4 little bits and pull out this psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology. It's a really good idea, by the way. If you learn how to say that now, it means you can go home and say that to people, and they really think you know what you're talking about, okay? Today we learned about psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, okay? Great. Your clients think we'll love you for it. So let's break that down. We're going to look at it in 4 different ways. The first one is you ingest sugars, okay? You ingest sugars, you obviously get an insulin response to those sugars. And when you have what they call insulinemia, if you have a raised insulin in your blood sugar, the insulin is there to pack away those sugars, that glucose, into your tissues, to store it away, It also does this with amino acids, the breakdown products of proteins, stores them away for later use, because back in the day you would gorge on food, you couldn't eat regular meals. Okay, so you'd be storing it. You'd especially be storing it for winter. Okay, lots of food in the summer, not much in the winter. You've got to get through. So this is what insulin is all about. Store it away. And when you see sugars, you go into storage mode. Okay, that's why we've got such a problem with obesity in our animals, because we're stimulating their insulin every single meal if we're feeding carbs, grain carbs. So if you're storing, obesity is a common sequel to that. And with obesity, the veterinary profession recognize that we can get musculoskeletal problems. Force is mass times acceleration. So if you increase the mass, you increase the force. We can get reproductive problems because our fat tissue is endocrinologically active. The more you have, the more it has an effect on your body. Okay? It will affect your hormones, again, because of this endocrinological activity. You see, I'm pronouncing my words very, very carefully. It can have cardiorespiratory effects. Yeah, you get fat around your heart. That's going to impede your heart function. You've got a lot of fat on your ribs as a dog and cat. It's going to change the way that you breathe. Urogenital and reproductive problems, and it is categorically a major risk factor for cancers, which is one of the scourges of modern human medicine and modern veterinary medicine. Okay? So this is how we understand that sugars, this is why sugars are to obesity what smoking is to lung cancer. Okay? Sugars and behavior. I'm sure there's a lot of behaviorists in the audience. And let's look at how sugars affect behavior, because this is fascinating. This is really, really good stuff. Sugars boost insulin. Every time you take a soluble carb meal, you get an increase in insulin, okay? And we've seen that can predispose to obesity. And when you change your hormones, and when you insult your musculoskeletal system, that can induce pain, and pain can impact behavior. That's a pretty obvious one. I think that's taken as read. But where it gets interesting is that where we have an increased insulin, you will also get that mid-morning low. Yeah? You have porridge for breakfast, you have your Cocoa Pops for breakfast, you're great for the first hour, and then, oh my goodness, I need a digestive biscuit. Oh my goodness, I need some kind of sugary snack mid-morning.
That's what's happening just there. And when you have low blood glucose in your body, you release adrenaline. Oh, I'm getting a bit jittery. I need some food. Okay? Or when your brain sees that you've got low blood glucose, you produce glutamate. And as Caroline said, glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. The net result from this low blood glucose, which is a knock-on effect of the sugars, is that we get glutamate and adrenaline, bringing on these unstable emotional situations. Look at road rage. Look at so many aspects of modern human society are massively. I had a laugh just here. Are so influenced by by low blood sugar, because we're having a seesaw like this and we don't even realize it. Okay, there's nothing wrong with having Yorkshire puddings with your roast beef, just as long as you know that that's what effect that's going to have on your body, and it's not difficult stuff. It's easy to understand this stuff. Okay. How can we link sugars and cancer? Sugars, sweet as candy. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. How can sugar be associated with cancer, which is the scourge of society? This is how it works. Insulin, when you've got increased insulin in your body, you will produce, and this is science, this is published, well-known science, you get insulin-like growth factor number 1. And growth is the key feature there. It stimulates cells. And if those cells are pretty unhappy from some other insult, toxic insult, for example, ba-dum, you've got a cancer situation. Yeah? So repeated increased insulin, that's why the insulinemia is associated with cancer. Insulin, blood glucose dip, adrenaline, cortisol, yeah? When in the stress, flight, fright, freeze, fiddle about, okay? These are the stress responses. Thank you very much. These are the stress responses, and the primary to get you away from the saber-toothed tiger, that is adrenaline, yeah? Run away from the stressor. And then afterwards, you've got tissue healing, tissue reducing inflammation, pain relief, so that you can then heal and then get back to your normal life. So adrenaline begets cortisol. Cortisol is immunosuppressive. When you are living in an immunosuppressed regime, you're very stressed a lot, or you're having a lot of carbs on a regular basis, i.e. you're feeding kibble, then if in an immunosuppressive environment, cancer can flourish. Okay, so you're just opening the doors and dusting down the carpet and welcoming it in by using the by feeding those sugars. By the way, cortisol, the person to read on cortisol, or the person to see on YouTube, is a guy called Robert Sapolsky. Okay, I think he's at Cornell. Just looking in the corner. No, I think he's at Cornell. He's a lecturer in endocrinology, physiology, and he says himself, I am in love with cortisol. He's a researcher, and he will tell you everything you need to know about cortisol. It's a fascinating book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Okay, I recommend it to all my clients in order to learn about this stuff. It's about people and stress, by the way. Okay, so it's a fascinating book to read. So sugars, immunosuppression, cancer. Don't do it. If you do it, at least know that you're doing it. Okay? And finally, sugars and diabetes. How can eating sugar cause you a sugar disease? You know, what's that about? Okay, this is how it works. Sugars will increase your insulin. We know about that, which can predispose to obesity. Fat is endocrinologically active and therefore can provoke diabetic situations. But also, this is the situation. 3 times a day, twice a day, you're producing lots of insulin. When in days of old, you would have just produced it very rarely because these carbs were very rare throughout evolution. So you're producing this insulin on a daily basis, loads and loads and loads of it. First of all, your tissues will respond to that insulin because they think, oh, it's insulin, better pack away the sugars, better pack away the fatty acids, better pack away the amino acids. But when there is high insulin in the blood over a long period, it's a bit like shouting at your dog again and again and again, or your children again and again and again. After a while, they just don't hear. After a while, the tissues don't listen to the message that the insulin is trying to say to pack things away, and so the blood glucose is left in the blood, and so you get this permanently increased blood glucose, which can have all these damaging effects. Okay? Which is why obesity and diabetes are such a problem in the human diet. Because when you say to people, don't eat soluble carbohydrates, they go, yeah, whatever, okay? And carry on in exactly the same behavior. The beauty of the veterinary situation is that you can control what you feed your dog. Yeah? You can't completely change the environment. You can't completely change what you do, the house. You can't completely change their character. But what you can do is you can change their food. You can completely control the food. Now, Caroline's work tells us that you have to be sympathetic, and if you can make them a part of that team to select their food, that would be a great idea. But food you can change for your dog even more than you can for yourself, okay? So I would modify Gary Taub's statement, this is my statement, and I would say sugars are to health what cigarettes are to lung cancer. Sugars are to health, yeah, to the entire, because P&I will take that insult and will distribute it very, very generously around your entire body. Okay? So this is how important the P&I story is, and what happens when you throw a spanner in the works. If you want to read more about the sugars and the detrimental effects they have, this is the guy to read, Dr. Richard Patton. He's a behaviorist, no, he's a nutritionist. He's been a US nutritionist, had been advising some of the major companies and zoos for the last 30 years. He's not in practice. He's not even a vet. So he's got this outside perspective. And he's the guy who I would say alerted me to the whole soluble carbs. If you feed soluble carbs, beware. Okay? If you buy his book on Amazon, it'll cost you 200 quid. Therefore, get it from his website because it'll cost you $18 plus postage. If you all get together, 10 of you or something like that, you can save on postage. But don't get it on Amazon, okay? Dr. Richard Patton, the book is called Ruined by Excess, Perfected by Lack, which is possibly the worst title of a book I've ever seen. If you have to explain the title, you've lost it. Okay, ruined by excess. It means that our dogs and cats are currently living in an excess of carb, and they are being damaged by it because they evolved. They were perfected through evolution by a lack of carbs, and we're the same. They are the canary in the coal mine to tell us how to improve our well-being.
this is big news. In human nutrition, this is really big news. I think that you'd go a long way to find a nutritionist who'd say, no, carbs are great. Feed loads of soluble carbohydrates. Okay, I think that this message is just about getting through to in human nutrition, but in veterinary nutrition, kibble is still king. Okay, and we need to graciously work with the manufacturers, work with our profession to try and improve health. Okay, and the first thing is to try and make them realize that actually feeding this soluble carbohydrate twice a day to your dog and your cat is maybe not a great idea. So Perlmutter, he was the guy who talked about the 113 pounds of soluble carbohydrate in the average American diet. And he wrote this pretty terrifying book telling you about how sugars can damage you. However, he made up for that in that he wrote another one saying how A, being careful of sugar, and B, looking after your microbiome. I'd love to talk to you about microbiome for a day or two, okay, because it fits in with the psychoneuroimmunology extremely well. But he wrote another book to say, sugars will damage you. This is how you can heal yourself. We've also got another one by Daniel Amen. Okay, these books are coming out, okay, but they're all saying essentially the same thing. And finally, Gary Taubes, he really hits the nail on the head. Why we get fat and what we can do about it. Okay, it's great. This is really, really good stuff. Okay, this is considered acceptable. This is considered the norm. This is okay. It's maybe a bit cutting edge, but it's totally accepted because the science is there. Whereas in veterinary medicine, the veterinary nutrition is still finding this very, very difficult to accept. You don't actually need to read any of these books because you can summarize them all in one word. What was that word? Sugars. Okay, sugars. Dangerous stuff. Okay, so forgive me 1 second. Sugars to dogs, even inadvertently, if you feed them in a kibble which doesn't have any sugar, it's just starch which is broken down, is one thing. I don't think it's a good thing, but it's one thing. Feeding cats an obligate, am I allowed to say cats in a meeting? Okay. Feeding cats an obligate carnivore who was designed to eat mice and birds and rabbits, feeding them 50% cereal. Words fail me, and that takes a lot. This is a Burmese, by the way. I love Burmese. Okay, so there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems in the moment, but I think we together can do a lot about it. But we're going to have to be clever. We're going to have to be very diplomatic. Let's have a look in the real world. What's happening in the real world? Let's have a look at obesity. These are some stats that you can take to your nutritionist. You can take them to your vet. You can take them to your clients, if you like. Okay. This is what the science is saying. And actually, these papers and this information is actually really difficult to find, I have to say, which really surprised me. Yeah, we've got an obesity epidemic. Everybody knows that. And yet finding the science which recognizes that and measures that is really difficult. In all the aspects of health that I'm just about to tell you, finding the data is really, really difficult, okay? So you're welcome to my research. It took about a week and a lot of asking colleagues, putting posts on the Raw Feeding Veterinary Society Facebook page to try and gather this information. You're welcome to it.
And Deborah Zoran, in her resume of obesity in dogs and cats in 2010, said, in the past 10 years, most investigators have agreed that at least 33% of dogs presented to veterinary clinics are obese, and that the incidence is increasing as human obesity increases in the overall population. Okay, so we're all drifting in the wrong direction. Okay, and this is the science. The PFMA, the Pet Food Manufacturers Association, in their last review, and I only know this because I'm doing some work with them, and because when you look on the website, you can't find this stuff for some reason. When they last did a survey, the conclusion was 55% of dogs are obese. Okay, in the UK. Okay, so this is the UK figures. Just a word of optimism, because I don't want to down your afternoon too much. But the PFMA, at the beginning of this year, there was one raw food member of the pet food manufacturers. Okay? One member. There are now 8 members within the Pet Food Manufacturing Association. And that says 2 things to me. One is that there are a lot of people who are wanting to do it properly and are wanting to do raw food. And number 2, that the establishment, the PFMA, who've been around for the last 30 years, is welcoming them in. They know that something's happening, and they're saying, yep, you're welcome, come on in. Yeah, if you talk, I know I can see 2 manufacturers at the very least who are members of the PFMA, or soon to be manufacturers. 3, yes, thank you, Vicky. So, these are the guys to talk to, okay, because they are part of the establishment now. Type 2 diabetes, rife in people. Look it up on the NHS website. Yeah, even the NHS is saying, whoa, this is a roller coaster that is out of control. Look it up in terms of veterinary medicine, and it's much more difficult to recognize. We need to do a lot of work here. But look, there is some work. Okay, this is some work that's coming out of Brisbane. And the statement there in this paper is the number of dogs diagnosed with diabetes mellitus, this is the sweet urine diabetes, type 2 diabetes, has increased 3-fold. Okay, I think anything that increases 3-fold needs to have some attention. For example, autism. In the 1980s, your chance of having a child with autism was something like 1 in 10,000, which is horrendous, but that was the chance. Okay. Nowadays, in the States, within certain communities with boys, because that's even worse than girls, it can be down to 1 in 40. When was the last time that made the front page? It's frighteningly ignored. Okay, and my opinion is that I think the whole carb thing, the whole kibble thing, is frighteningly ignored in the veterinary profession. It's wrong, in my opinion. A little bit more on type 2 diabetes. Okay, this is some figures from a paper, and they looked at diabetes between 1970 and 1999, and the incidence per 10,000 dogs down here is about 20%, and up here it's more like about 70%. So this is mirroring 3 times the amount of disease that we're seeing now than we saw 20, 30 years ago. Trying to find information on dental problems and urinary problems
is even more difficult, amazingly. Yeah, we don't have an NHS where we can just download all the data from all the practices, all the hospitals in the UK. We just don't have that kind of feedback. So I was thinking, how can I get this across? How can I get this across? Who does know the level of disease in the UK? Who do you think I went to? They know exactly how much disease there is in the UK, yeah? Because they're having to fork out. And the less disease there is, the happier they'd be, because they can take your premium and not have to pay you, okay? I know of one practice, there may be more, but there's not more than 3 practices. I know of one practice in Essex whereby they have a wellness program. Yeah, you've heard it. In the conventional practice, it's, yep, you go on the wellness program, we'll pay for your vaccines, we'll pay for your flea products, and we will pay for your worming, okay? And we'll pay for a checkup every year, okay? That's the conventional model, and it's been rolled out right across the country. At his practice, you can join their wellness program, but you can only join if you feed raw. Okay, and they're finding the dividends for the practice are enormous because the raw-fed dogs need a fraction of the intervention of the processed kibble-fed dogs. Okay, so this is changing. Yeah, thankfully. If you talk to me later, I can give you the practice. It is remarkable. And if you're in Essex, they're great people. So, what did Pet Plan? What did Pet Plan think about disease in the UK? And the answer is, when you look on their claim form, this is the back of the claim form. Yeah, you fill in the front of the claim form, and the vet fills in the back of the claim form. And if you look there, can you read that? Oh, you can't read that? Okay, it's dental treatment. That is for dental treatment. Okay, so they were having so many claims that they pre-fill the claim form for dental claims. Okay, and this chimes with the information we're getting from the American Veterinary Medicine Association, who in 2012, the president of the AVMA said 70% of cats and 80% of dogs have got periodontal disease. Okay, which will mean that they're going to need dental treatment at some time near in the future. Okay, so and as 96% of dogs are fed kibble and cats the same, it would suggest there may be a link there. Does kibble clean teeth? I really don't think so. Okay, if it did, then these manufacturers wouldn't need to invent kibbles that had a tooth cleaning effect. Yeah? So they pre-fill in the form with dental treatment. They also pre-fill in the form with urinary disease. Okay? 30, 40 years ago, urinary disease was recognized and it was present, but in the last 30 years it has gone up to the extent that they need to pre-fill in insurance claim forms because vets are just going through so many of these claim forms. Okay? If you made a film of this, they would say they would throw it out because it is just beyond any kind of reasonable comprehension. It would be fantasy, but it is reality. Okay? Scary stuff, scary stuff. Cancer. What are the figures on cancer? Okay, thank you, Rodney, for ruining this slide. But I'm going to take you through it because I think it's a really important slide. Okay? And so if this is, let me introduce it first of all. So up here we've got cancer, from 0 cancer to 60% in a population. And on here, this is the weight of the animal, except this is an exponential graph. Don't worry, we're just going to look between about 10 kilos and about 100 kilos. Okay, so let's look between there and there. Okay, so we're going to look at this now. So this is cancer rate in populations, in animal populations. In wild and captive species, this is in blue, these are just mammals, okay? In blue, we've got less than 10%. If we look at dogs, they're in red. There isn't a dog breed that they've researched that is below about 15% within the population. And they go north from there until you get to the Irish Water Spaniel at the top, where you've got an incidence of nearly 60% within the population. Flatties, obviously, they're going to be high up there as well. Okay, so this is the general population, and these are animals, 96% of which are fed kibble. There may be an association there. We can't say for sure, but all you can say is there is a major, major, major trend, and I'm not sure that we're really, really addressing that. And I would welcome any colleagues, if they were wanting to investigate this, to go further with it. Okay? Frightening stuff. Most animals, dogs. Frightening stuff. Just to reiterate this is a study in Switzerland between 1955 and 2008, and they basically looked at the incidence of cancer within the population, and it went from about 50, 60, 70 to about 700 per 100,000, i.e. about a 10-fold increase between 1955 and 2008. Difficult to find this stuff. Why is that? I think that it's to do with lifestyle. I think it's to do with over-vaccination. I think it's to do with overuse of pesticides. And I think it's got a lot to do with feeding excess of carbohydrate in kibbles every single day. And I've shown you why I think that. Okay? This is the justification for my thoughts on why I think that sugars are a very dangerous thing to you and me and our dogs. So, don't worry, we're there. To conclude, if we just want to wrap everything up, first thing is to say that everything is connected, okay? So, psychology, neurology, endocrinology, immunology, all of these things are interlinked and they all play a part. You can look at things simply, but don't kid yourself that a simple explanation is the bottom line. There is usually more to it. And if you're being palmed off with simple explanations, you can probably find a more profound answer if you look a wee bit. Holism, I would say that, wouldn't I? But holism, to me, is your best bet. Because if you're presented with a lame dog, you're not presented with a leg. You're presented with a thing with a brain and a nose and a skin and lungs and gut, and a psychology and neurology, and it has endocrinology, and it has immunology. And I think just treating that lame dog for the lameness, if it's a recurrent lameness, okay, not just a simple sprain, is short-sighted. And I think I look forward to the veterinary medicine of the future being much more holistic. And if it takes my profession to call holism psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, then that's okay, because it allows them a way in. It allows them to say, aha,
everything is everything, and we can look at the body as a whole. Okay, they will call it psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology until they get sick of it, and then they'll just call it holism. Okay, and by that time, the holistic vets, and I salute you, the holistic vets and the holistic nurses in this will be dead and gone, but the message will go forward. I sincerely hope. Sugar is a slow poison. Okay, I've really scared you, and I'm sorry about that. But if this can just change your thinking even slightly, then I think that this is a great thing. PNEI is not so complex after all, isn't it? PNEI is holism. Holism is PNEI. I'm happy with just calling it holism. But it needs to be approached intelligently and thoughtfully in the full knowledge that it is psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology. It's not, it's just fluffy, hippie stuff. Okay? It's real, it's hardcore, it's great. Okay? And I can't do a talk without talking about food. Okay? So, this is something that I have been itching to talk with my colleagues and with clients who are here and with everybody about. This is something I found out at the London Vet Show a couple of weeks ago. And this, for me, is proof that all the raw feeders in the room, we are on the right track, because that thing which we thought was going to happen has happened. Nestlé Purina last year bought Merrick's, and Merrick's are now producing a raw infused I kid you not, look, a raw infused, i.e. it contains freeze-dried meat along with the kibble. Yeah, if you look, you can look it up. It's online. Okay, it says super duper kibble combined with freeze-dried meat. So this is your defense, if you like. You know, people say, oh, raw food is really bad. You're going to get salmonella. You're going to get all sorts of horrible diseases. You can say, well, Nestlé Purina don't think so. Okay, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. I thought I would leave you on a high note. We're done.